everyone. It's me, Kira, after literally 4 years of being dead, and I've returned to you with another Speedpaint video, where I have departed from the land of giving so many fucks to giving none at all. Life has been happening, and I realize that life is going to keep happening to me, so due to all of that, I will now be doing something with my unwanted existence, namely being unafraid of being cringe. So I return to my DeviantArt page, to my drawing, to my old OC, Preston Calloway. I've been wanting to do a redrawing video for a while now, and Preston has always been my... well, he has a backstory I can stand. So here he is. I intend to do other redraws as it suits me, but this channel is basically entirely for me and my silly goofies, so I don't hold myself to any strict decisions. I mostly just want to do something that actively isn't work, and I encourage anyone who is struggling with the oppressive hellscape that is life right now to do the same. As such, here we are, and story time it is. Preston was my OC from all the way back in 2018. He was originally based on the concept of Jet, the drug from the Fallout franchise, as I'd been playing Fallout 3 at the time, and he acts sort of as a post-apocalyptic doctor. I'll tell you a story with a few changes here and there from the original, but before we get into that, I do want to just make some small points about the drawing that we're working on. This drawing, one, is completely different from my old style of drawing, because again, it's been 4 years. But also, my tablet, the original one I used to record all of my other videos, well, it no longer has a face, so I bought a new one. It is an old XP pen graphic tablet, and I've been using it for a while to work on some other little things here and there. But it doesn't like me very much. I haven't been able to replace the nib on it for a while, which is what I'm assuming the problem is. So every so often when I draw a line, it will decide to draw it like 2 inches to the left for no reason, so I have to smack it against something to make it work. And later in this drawing, you'll notice it, but every time I would try to draw a line, it would horrifically glitch. So if you notice weird pen movements, that is specifically why. You'll also notice way later in the video that this sketch eventually involves mushrooms that I wanted to add. It's part of the backstory, which we'll get to in a moment. Every single time I would specifically try to render these mushrooms, my pen would just refuse. So enjoy them in the sketch. You'll probably never see them again. With that said, let's get into the backstory. Preston Calloway, before the world came to an end, was originally a forensic scientist from Wisconsin. He had at one point been renowned in his field, and for all of the cases he'd worked on, with an integrity few matched. It is only this tenacity and scientifically inclined nature that allow him to both survive and navigate the now monster-infested wastes of the United States. With the desire to find a more temperate and hospitable climate for prolonged survival, Preston moved south and eventually found a small community of survivors in need of a doctor. Having a chemistry background and a want for food, Preston offered his, albeit limited, but better than nothing, expertise to the survivors. In return, he not only got a full stomach, but a place to stay and some semblance of safety from what wandered the ravaged lands. That luck, though, kind of turned when he was hunting for medicinal herbs and supplies with a couple of his fellow survivors. It had been while making the long trek through a rather muddy area that Preston noticed an odd red glow from beneath a tree. Further investigation revealed it to be a fungus of sorts. A rather fleshy red with a faint but notable bioluminescence. His initial instinct was that it was dangerous, but the village relied on the nearby animals for food, and such a mushroom hardly seemed natural. It could harm the local wildlife if left to grow unchecked, so he carefully harvested them to do further research and went on his way. Though the mushroom, upon investigation, seemed to suggest interesting benefits when examined and presented in small doses to mice. The mice completed small mazes more efficiently, tired less, and even ones that showed small signs of injury healed much faster than ones normally would. So, in the name of science, Preston decided to upgrade to a human test subject. Himself. Because who in their right mind would want to swallow mushrooms that were found randomly in the woods and glowed bright red? The results could barely be believed. He felt more cheerful, could do more in a day, and still managed to wind down for sleep. Even his hair gained a bit of more body and shine, and there wasn't a single side effect in sight. Or at least, he assumed as much. In testing for potential dependency issues and withdrawal symptoms, he found himself with nothing really wrong, besides a slight headache. Those around him, however, noticed things really weren't right with him anymore. He was unfocused and spacey, often forgetting where he placed things or what he was doing. His hands gained a notable tremor, and it left Preston confused when his patients would refuse certain treatment as he held a sharp scalpel between trembling fingers. He was also notably clumsier. His motor skills clearly deteriorated, but he could only find in him one simple solution: take more of the fungus. Started with small doses, enough to focus, to sharpen up and clear his head pain. Then he found himself misremembering his dosage, so he wrote it down. He'd then forget if he'd taken it or not, so he'd go for a second dose, then a third, then... well, it was hard to remember. It seemed to him it was hardly having an effect anymore, so perhaps an injection would be more potent. Then what was the dose again? And then, why was he so angry? Missing a dose, he had to have missed one, cut his fuse short. Made him barely coherent at times, so up the dosage went. Again and again, and testing only showed the fungus working miracles. He healed from every grievous injury. He couldn't even feel it half the time, so more had to be the answer. Never mind his unsteady hands, nor the mood swings, or even the fact his once jet black hair was now red and ever growing. Sure, he had to stitch up the occasional injury, but more helped. So of course, putting it in an IV was the single best idea he could possibly have. His fellow survivors were wary of him after this change, refusing to visit and not knowing how to assist. Some of the kinder souls still brought him food, but even they did so hesitantly. The only people who ever came by were the desperate. Tragically, Preston was still the only semblance of a doctor they had for miles. As such, he was the only one anyone could turn to for grievous injuries. People became more careful, but every once in a while, they had to visit the doctor. And that's Preston. I like the idea of the drug remaining unnamed, mostly because I never named it, and Preston sure doesn't have the sense to do so anymore, but what can you do? And for curious souls that like lists, all of the side effects of this mushroom include forgetfulness, headaches, numbness, various heart problems, shakiness, amnesia, spasms, blackouts, mild hallucinations, hair growth, hair discoloration, and other possible side effects. So at some point, Preston is probably going to die, but the mushroom is very good at preventing that from happening. I like to think this is what created a lot of the horrific creatures from the lab, and so eventually we'll have a Last of Us situation, but regardless. This drawing was one that is much more in tune with my style of drawing now. I learned how to draw noses. Everyone say congratulations. You'll notice earlier that I can halfway draw hands, but not really. Still no. I specifically wanted to keep with the general vibe of the old drawing in that it's a tattered, definitely insane man. I don't know if I captured that necessarily in the expression, but I like to think I captured it in everything else. You'll also notice that the coat is not nearly as tattered as everything else that this man is wearing, but I do fix that later. I also tried just very, very hard to make sure everything looked like the objects are supposed to, because as much as the IV in the original drawing looks like IV bags, it's also thin as shit, so and I've focused on that. I believe later when I get to filling in the numbers and everything, I have to look up a reference for that. I pushed the needles down instead of, because the glowing effect was really nice, but that's not how injection needles work traditionally. I suppose implication-wise, there probably would still be some in there, because that wouldn't surprise me if Preston fully forgot to push them all the way down. But having both be full and still somehow staying where they are is unreasonable. And again, nothing about this is really all that reasonable, so such is art. Then again, I never was a person of reason. I will also add, I really miss telling stories like this and creating characters. It gives the brain a little exercise, and it's just plain fun. Being able to realize things in a way I haven't been able to years ago is also cool to see, and it's just nice to be doing stuff again. Can't say how frequently I'm going to be posting again, given it will be as the mood strikes me, and I'm not even sure if this will all necessarily be Speedpaints, giving its editing and effort, and I like to procrastinate. But I essentially just want to give myself the option. So, once in a pale blue moon, you may see I've done something else. I actually wanted to do 3 drawings out of this, by the way. Multiple view draws, but this one alone was half an hour, so yeah. This video is so long, in fact, that I find myself running out of things to talk about. As such, I think I'll just let the rest of it play out. I hope you all enjoy the rest of this video, and whatever else I decide to post. And however infrequent or frequent that might be. So I hope you all have a nice day. And don't eat random glowing mushrooms you find on the ground.